Hi, and welcome back to another video. And today I'll be doing my March 2025 governor election predictions. These are the type of videos I do every month, where within the year of 2025, obviously at the end of the year, we have governor elections for Virginia and New Jersey, and every once a month, I drop my predictions. So this is my March 2025 governor predictions for both Virginia and New Jersey. So these are where I think that the races are going to be as of right now. These are who I think that would have won if the election was held today, which obviously it isn't. But basically, it's a trend vibe. It's a trend vibe. So as of right now, obviously we have to really rely this stuff on how some polls are looking as of right now. Obviously including the 2025 governor polls for Virginia, for Sears and Spanberger. And you guys have, you've seen on my previous videos where I've constantly been talking about how Spanberger has been having so much momentum despite announcing her candidacy so early into the election. And Sears, the Republican candidate who will most likely become the nominee in June, which is 3 months from now, crazy if you can believe it, um, is the lieutenant governor. And she is, the lieutenant governor under, a Republican governor who was able to win 4 years ago by just under 2 points. He is very popular in Virginia. However, unfortunately for Sears, he's not able to run. And you'd think with her being Glenn Youngkin's lieutenant governor, that she would be able to, you know, get the amount of popularity that Youngkin had and be able to win. However, that does not look like it's happening, as Spanberger seems to be incredibly popular and a very strong Democratic candidate and has been leading in all these polls. Now, unfortunately for me and my channel, 538 no longer is available, and I am now forced to use a website I only rarely used in the past, especially during the 2024 election campaign between Harris and Trump. I mainly used 538, and for those Senate races, and for those House races, and for those governor races in 2024. I rarely used Real Clear Politics, and I always used 538. I thought it was more kind of center. I thought it was less biased. But now, because 538 is gone, I will be forced to use Real Clear Politics, and I will try to avoid any of the biased polls that come from, Republican-sponsored polls or Democrat-sponsored polls. Um, but yeah, like this poll right here, right? This is obviously a Republican sponsored poll, and you'll see a lot of these that are either sponsored by a Democrat PAC or a Republican PAC or by, one of the candidates. However, on this side, there are only two polls for the Virginia governor race. On 538, there was so much more. But obviously here we have, right, Spanberger, leading by 15 and Spanberger leading by 6. Obviously, we are going to have to wait a while until we get another poll. But you know what? Once we do, I will definitely be reporting on that. But the last poll we got on this website is on March 4th, 2025, where Spanberger was leading Sears by 6 points. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you would know that I was constantly talking about how Sears has been unable to, be in a poll where she is leading Spanberger. She has not done that in the 538 polls we looked at that we can no longer look at, and as of looking at this, she cannot do that in the Real Clear Politics polls we are looking at. So this is a huge problem for Sears, and if this continues even after the primaries, obviously during the primaries, because they're both, well, actually, no, Spanberger is the only one that is unopposed. Sears actually has an opponent, but the opponent isn't really like a real threat for her, and obviously, I do expect Sears to win her nomination easily, and for Spanberger to win her nomination easily. These two candidates are going to be women. Whoever wins will be, I believe, the first, governor, first female governor of Virginia. Um, but yeah. So I believe that when, the primaries happen, both of these will get a lot of name notice. It will be picked up by probably news outlets. And despite Glenn Youngkin's endorsement, like I said, popular Republican governor, he endorsed her, and it really didn't seem to do much. And especially with the Trump administration, as you can see here, with President Trump's approval rating now underwater. I reported when I went underwater on 538. And like I said, there's going to be some biased polls here. You can see Rasmussen's Republican biased. Fox News, obviously Republican biased. Reuters is a good poll. Atlas is a good poll. They predicted a Trump victory, by the way. Emerson is a good poll. CNN is okay. Trafalgar is also Republican biased. But yeah. Yeah, I will not be paying attention to those polls, even though some of them actually do have President Trump in the negatives. But you do have some of them in the positives. But obviously President Trump's approval rating is going in the complete wrong direction. And this is going to get even possibly worse. As long as this gets only worse, it is going to affect more and more Republican candidates, as we saw for the Democrats. Sure, it didn't hurt Democrats in 2022. However, there was one Democrat in 2022 that wasn't able to win re-election. And that was the governor of Nevada. He was a Democratic governor. He was the governor in a swing state running for re-election, and he was defeated by his Republican opponents. And now for that Republican opponent is now governor, and he's going to be up for re-election next year. And obviously, I will be, covering that race once, we get closer to that, election day in 2026. But that is still a year and a half away. We still have much more to go. But anyways, back to what I was saying here is that President Trump's approval rating, if it gets worse, if it continues to get worse, then that will mean that it will only harm more Republican candidates. And as if you all know, that Joe Biden had a positive approval rating, right? Donald Trump started off with a very good approval rating. +2, right? Well, actually, on 538, I'm actually not used to this. On 538, it was actually much better here. This is February. Is there a, okay, here's Max. Okay, here we go. So, so this goes back to January 27th. Okay, this is good. So, yeah, on the start of President Trump's second term of his administration, his approval stood at a 6+ approval rating. Very good for President Trump. However, it quickly started declining as his honeymoon started to fade. And you saw it, still in the positives, but his disapproval rating, started to have, kind of gaining the steam here. And still, his approval was a little steady until it decided to completely collapse up a couple days after his State of the Union address, where stuff like Elon Musk, the Doge cuts, the spending, everything that's been happening in these recent months here has taken a negative toll on his approval rating. And if it continues to get worse, like I said before, it's only going to harm more Republican candidates. We saw that with Joe Biden, when Joe Biden's approval rating tanked in August of 2021, and Glenn Youngkin won the Virginia governor race by less than 2 points, and Phil Murphy barely won re-election. He almost lost re-election because Joe Biden's approval rating was crashing, and because Americans were starting to have such a sour taste with Joe Biden and starting to disapprove of what he was doing, especially with what was happening with Afghanistan. So if something like that for President Trump continues, like we're seeing right now, with the what's it called, the Signal app controversy, then I don't think it's going to be as much backlash as the Afghanistan crisis was, but it's certainly going to be very troubling for President Trump, and to see if he gets out of it. And, like I, already mentioned, that his approval rating is in the negatives. And if it gets worse, then it is still going to harm more Republican candidates. And that goes with Sears. She is already down in these polls. She is already... Okay, now I have to go find the polls, but you guys know what I'm saying. She is already down in these polls, where she is, trying to fight off this popular Democratic candidate. And if she is unable to do so, she most likely will lose the election. So as of right now, I'm going to be putting this race as a likely Democrat race, because Sears has been able to, lead in, polls for months now. Months. Even before the Trump was sworn into office, or even elected for that matter. So Sears has been able to, keep her polling momentum, and if she, is able to continue it to the primaries, if she is able to continue it to election day, she is most likely to win the election. So I'm going to put that as likely Democrat. Now, New Jersey is extremely complicated as of right now. We do not have a we don't have a a really we don't have a really big idea on who exactly these candidates are going to be for the Democratic primary as of right now. The June primary is coming up, and we have a jungle field primary of Democrats. You have Russ Baraka, Steve Phillip, Jess Geimer, all these people, Mike Sherrill. I've talked about these people in my previous videos. Cory Booker has declined. You have all these Democrats, and then you have in the Republican primary, you have another jungle primary field because Republicans believe, as of right now, this is a possible pickup for them. And Democrats, obviously, Phil Murphy, he's ineligible to run for another term. So Democrats are, obviously it's going to be a jungle primary for the Democrats, but it's also a jungle primary for the Republicans because not only did they come close from winning the last governor election, 2021, but President Trump also came really close to defeating Kamala Harris in the election for New Jersey. However, Harris did defeat him by a small margin, but it was close, dangerously close. And Democrats are, sounding off alarm bells that is not good for them. Especially if Donald Trump is able to come that close with winning a known very blue state as of New Jersey that has gone very well for the Democrats for a very long time now. So there are a lot of Republican candidates here that believe, they are the right choice to be able to flip this state blue or red, to flip this state red, to flip the governor mansion red, and to be able to win the governor election. So as of right now, I do believe that it is really hard to settle on a candidate here, but we will have a much better idea and a much bigger picture here once the primaries come and go. And I can't wait because, like I said, we'll have we'll know who the candidate is. We'll see the polls. We'll know, and it'll be very interesting to track. But as of right now, I think it's going to go to the Democrats. And why is that? Well, because I said before, look at Trump's approval rating. If this gets worse, if this somehow possibly gets worse, it is only going to harm the Republicans. And the Republican candidates, running in these governor elections for 2025, in all these elections 2026, even the governor elections 2027, and the Republicans in 2028. And who knows what Trump's approval rating will be at by then. So, yeah, if it gets worse, it is not going to be good for the Republicans, any Republican candidate, Republican governors, the Republican National Committee, just like it was for the Democrats. Biden's unpopularity hurt Harris because she was the vice president of that administration. She was a part of so much of what he did that the American people were not fond of. And they punished her for that. And now we have President Trump. And now we're starting to see the similar thing, where President Trump is doing these things where the American people are not very fond of, and it's quickly tanking his approval rating, just like it did. Let's see if I can find Biden's approval, just like it did for President Biden's approval rating, if it loads here. But President Biden left office for Real Clear Politics with a negative 18 approval rating. Like I mentioned before, he came to office with a very popular approval rating. Up to plus 19 for approval rating, approve 55, disapprove 36. And then once we got to that Afghanistan withdrawal crisis, President Biden's approval rating tanked, his disapproval took over, and his approval rating obviously never recovered. I mean, there were some jumps, but other than that, it never recovered. And President Biden left office with a negative 18 approval rating, negative 18.1 approval rating. So the same thing could happen to President Trump. And if it does, like it happened with President Biden and the Democrats and Kamala Harris, if President Trump's approval rating continues to tank, it will only harm Republican candidates and President Trump's legacy of his second term. So that is why, as of right now, I do believe that New Jersey is going to be very close, but it's going to go to the Democrats. It is going to go to the Democrats. It is going to be extremely close, but I think it's going to go to the Democrats. Only because President Trump's approval rating is in the negatives, but it's not far into the negative. President Trump's approval rating has a chance to, turn itself around. But if it doesn't, it's going to get worse for any New Jersey Republican that is hoping to flip this state red. But until then, I do believe that the Democrats do have an advantage right now when it comes to New Jersey, and especially when it comes to Virginia. So until then, we will be seeing what this looks like. But yeah, this is my prediction as of the end of this month, which being March 2025. But anyways, that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.